Welcome to the Glassworking Shop. This is the fifth and final video of the Glassworking series that I started a few days ago. In this video, I'm going to be assembling the hexagonal pieces into a chipstack using the chipstack assembly fixture. So let's get going. Taking it out of the kiln where it's been preheating and putting it on the guide. This keeps it off the bench surface. This is my prototype assembly fixture for putting together chip stacks. I realize that most glass workers, or at least many glass workers, put together their chip stacks kind of in midair. They put the piece on a punty. Let me get the fan going here. Put the first chip on a punty, and then put the next chips in the series on with tweezers while the piece is just hanging there in thin air. I find this somewhat inconvenient. I've never really gotten good results using this method, so I invented this assembly fixture, and it seems to work really good. I really like it. So after preheating the pieces, just kind of getting everything a little bit hotter than it was. Of course, it did come out of the kiln. Gently heating the pieces in preparation for fusing them together. I'm using my tripod's in the way there. I'm using a tool that I made with a kind of a rounded over point. Starting at the center and heating the pieces and just gently pushing the edges together. As the edges of the chips are heated, they kind of tend to round over a little bit, and by just gently pressing on the rounded edge, I'm able to get it to fuse together with minimum distortion. Of course, the trick here, what I'm trying to do, is avoid moving the glass sideways, avoid stretching any more than it has to, and just in general, avoid distorting my patterns as I'm pressing it together. These pieces were pulled, shaped to hexagon shape and squeezed in the squeezer, and then pulled down. And even though the squeezer produces fairly precise results, by the time you end up pulling it down, the pulling introduces a bit of distortion. And I'm not sure if that's because of my skill level as a puller, or it's just because of the nature of just the dynamics of glass. but one way or another, the pieces are fairly good. The accuracy is actually quite good, but it's not perfect. The center section of the pattern was not from the same pull as the fourth video. It was made earlier, off camera, before I started doing these videos. I kind of like having a different pattern in the center of these. Kind of gives it a little more variety. These pieces, these chips that I'm fusing together, are about 1/4 of an inch thick. I cut them on my prototype wet saw, which is actually working exceptionally well. And it's got precision linear bearings and fixturing that allows me to precisely cut the border pieces. When doing a chip stack like this, I have to always have a kind of a sacrificial border, even if I'm going to throw it away, because if I try to get the pattern all the way to the edge, well, it's going to round off on the edges. And if I want a nice, sharp, crisp edge, I have to put something on the edge that I don't care about, that'll get rounded over, and then after the fusing is finished, I can go ahead and just grind it off on the lap wheel. So that has fused together on the top, and the fixture is no longer necessary. I'm a bit concerned here about the torch because my camera cable is in the way of the flame, and I don't want to set my camera cable on fire. So always something to watch out for in the hot shop. So going to take the piece out of the assembly fixture. The assembly fixture has done its job, and the piece is now fused well enough that I can take it out of the fixture, put it on a graphite plate, and continue the final fusing. I'm using a socket to avoid touching the hot screws. The screws are stainless steel and they're threaded into graphite, and this results in a fairly smooth unthreading when the screws are hot, which wasn't true when I first started making assembly fixtures and used metal threads. So I'll get the piece out of here with tweezers, get it over onto the graphite, put the tweezer away. The area behind the torch is safe now. Get my torch going again. Using the Mirage hand torch that just works exceptionally well for this operation. I can very quickly switch from the large flame to the smaller flame. I really like the Mirage hand torch. What I'm doing now, after all of the time that I took unscrewing and resetting, piece gets a little cold, and I have to be very careful to not let this assembly get cold, because there's always a chance of cracking before it's fused together. Of course, at the moment, it's just barely starting to get fused together. It's not fully fused by any means, and I need to be very, very careful to keep it hot and to keep it uniformly hot until it finally becomes a solid piece of glass. I'm working here on a half-inch piece of graphite, which I've found to be the best surface. As I said in my video totally dedicated to the chipstack assembly fixture, I tried a number of different approaches. Tried steel, tried stainless, tried fire brick, tried kiln shelf material, and graphite seems to work the best. So just about got the top side fused together well enough that the piece will survive being flipped. So let's get started fusing the bottom. The hexagonal marine chips that I'm using are the ones that I've made over the last 4 videos, and they didn't come out quite as good as I wanted them to. I'm a slight bit disappointed with the result, but a lot of what I do is essentially R&D. I've never actually done that particular pattern before, and my ability to visualize in advance what the final result is going to look at kind of hasn't been developed yet. Seems like every one I do has a bit of a surprise. Of course, the more I do, the more I'm able to predict, and the less surprise I encounter. Of course, surprise can be a good thing. Sometimes on a few of my patterns, I was very pleasantly surprised. The centerpiece, I had no idea that it was going to turn out as good as it did. And it just came out marvelously. So I kind of am somewhat happy sometimes to be surprised, when it's a good surprise, and sometimes disappointed when, oh, I thought that was going to look better. when I started doing these patterns, I concentrated on the yellows, reds, oranges, contrasted with black. For the hexagons that I made in the video series, I was experimenting with some of the blues and greens and aquas, and and white. And I'm finding that it's a little more challenging to work with those colors, because unlike the black and yellow, black and red, they kind of tricky to get bold contrast. The blues and the greens tend to kind of look similar and sometimes don't even look that good. May just be the nature of colored glass that the blues and greens are more difficult colors to generate. But I've seen amazingly beautiful glasswork done by others using the blues and the greens and the whites, so just going to have to learn how to use them. Most of the outer rim of this assembly is sacrificial, and I'm going to grind a lot of it away before I mount the pattern into my sculpture. So got to be really careful. I was sliding a little bit using the flat paddle, and it's okay to slide a little bit, but in one of my previous designs, I got the surface too hot, slid too much, and actually smeared it, which is never a good idea. I'm trying to get it as flat as I can with the flat paddle, because I've only got 1/4 inch of thickness, and even though I'm going to be grinding and polishing on the lap wheel, I don't have that much glass to work with, and the flatter that I can get it in the hot form, the better off I'm going to be. So that is getting closer all the time here. The key to this process, the key to making this process work, is just go slow. A lot of my colors are fairly sensitive, want to boil them. And of course the pressure that I apply with the graphite tools, trying to keep that very, very gentle. Pretty much all of these corners ended up being slightly rounded off, and by very carefully and gently pressing, I can usually get the glass to flow into the corner without a tremendous lot of distortion. Of course, nothing in glass is ever perfect, at least so far at my skill level. So I always get some distortion, but I try to minimize it. And it seems that every one of these that I do gets just a little bit better. I'm somewhat fighting against my support here too, because as I'm heating the glass, the graphite is sucking a little bit of my heat out, but I'm happy with the trade-off because the graphite keeps everything flat, and when it comes time to finally grind and polish these designs, I really don't have to lap away very much at all if I've done my job correctly in the forming, fusing, and flattening. That is getting very, very close. And of course, even though my pattern from the last few days didn't turn out the way I thought it did, there's a chance it might actually be a cool pattern. I might actually like it when it's done. As I was saying about surprises, sometimes surprises are good. See how the white pieces fuse when I'm fusing these patterns together, and there may be some slight differences in color between the chips, if there's a complex pattern, I kind of don't notice the difference because the pattern hides it. But when it's a solid color, it becomes even more critical that everything is uniform. So we'll see how good the white looks when it's finally lapped to size, ground away, and polished. There's always a chance that, especially with white, because white is such an unforgiving color, there's always a chance that I'll be able to see the lines in between, and depending on how annoying that is, I may grind away more of the sacrificial outer white layer and just concentrate on showcasing the internal pattern. And yes, for those who are wondering, this process does produce a pretty well fused final result. I've done a number of these in this style, probably, I don't know, 10 or so, and something like that. Haven't had a problem with cracking. Well, it is getting closer all the time. The handheld Mirage works exceptionally well for this process. I'm so happy that I have it available in my tool set. When I first started using this method, I didn't have the Mirage, I just had the smaller Lynx handheld, and it worked, but I sure like the Mirage. A little heavy to hold. It gets a tiny bit annoying to hold it up after a while. Maybe I'll make some kind of sling or spring-loaded arm thing or something to take some of the weight, but just as far as the function of the torch, I really love the handheld Mirage. And just to follow up a little bit on what I said about being slightly disappointed with the pattern, that's a question that I've been debating as I make these videos, do I want to only make videos where everything comes out perfect? Or do I want to show my problems? Do I want to show the pieces that don't come out that well? And I think what I'm going to do, what I've decided on doing, is just make videos. The stuff comes out the way it comes out. If it comes out good, it comes out good. If it comes out a little bit less than good, well, it's history. This is what was made in this place on this day. Of course, if I waited until making a perfect piece before doing a video, I'd never make any videos because I haven't made a perfect piece yet. And it seems like as my skill increases, my critical ability increases a little bit faster. So I'm never satisfied. And of course that's true in everything I do. I'm a very experienced woodworker and metalworker, and also a very experienced critic of wood and metalwork. And when I look at my old pieces and think about my old pieces, it seems like all I remember is the mistakes, even though I'm pretty good at recovering from mistakes in woodwork and metalwork. And most people looking at my final product would never guess that a mistake was made along the way. But I know where they all are. Okay, this is pretty close to fused together. Of course, to just say one more philosophical comment about, well, why do I even make these videos? I'm not a glass master. I'm not the finest glass worker in the country. But why do I make them? Because I enjoy making them. It's yet another challenge, yet another fun thing to do. And might be valuable to somebody. Shows how some of my inventions are used. Not everybody uses the tools that I've invented, and many people might be fascinated to see the possibilities of different tools and different techniques for glasswork. And even though I haven't achieved master skill level, there are probably less experienced glassworkers who could learn something by watching me, and possibly even very experienced glassworkers who might get some kind of inspiration just looking at a different technique that they've never seen before, and maybe that would inspire them to either try it or invent another one. And then there's always the possibility that a very experienced glassworker will watch what I'm doing and send me a comment saying, "Dude, you really suck. Let me show you how to do it right." Then I'll learn something. And of course, that's what this adventure is all about. I think that finishes that side, and it might have finished the piece. And even though this is the last video in the glassworking series on this design, I will be doing videos on the wood and metal portions of the sculpture. So the entire process will be documented. Well, actually not the entire process. Many of the components that I used were made off camera, but they were made with a very similar technique and very similar tools. So every process used to make this piece will be fully documented. And in the future, I'm trying to avoid repetition, and I may repeat videos that I think I can do better. I may repeat videos just for fun sometimes, but mostly I'll be making videos that show different tools, different techniques. I'm an inventor, constantly inventing new tools, constantly inventing new techniques. And that does it for today. Thank you for watching.